because I've been doing a lot of like, vending and being in places that it's mainly like white spaces. So for example, I did the Chicago Comic Con this past April. That's my first experience doing any type of comic book convention. And so my husband and we flew out, and it's mainly white people there, but there's so many African Americans were there as well. And I was in a writer's block, and I was there with maybe about six other sister authors. So it was great. It was a nice group in that area, but it was always people just walking by and they're like, and they're looking. And I also do coloring books, and I do like Black fantasy coloring books. And so I do that as well because you have people who might want to support you, who might want to engage with books, but they're not always necessarily like fantasy readers, but they want to do something else. I would tell you, it was one of the custodians. It was a sister, and that first day she stopped, she saw, and she said, "You know what? I love this." She said, "But I don't really read this." But she said, "I have grandkids." So she went over to the coloring book side, and she said, I don't carry money on me. Why would she? She's working." And she said, "But I'm going to be back." So that whole weekend I saw this sister, and I'm really giving her a shout out because it's all of these people. And then you have this Black woman, probably like in her 50s, maybe early 60s, and she's serving all of these folk, and she's pushing these big trash cans. So one day I saw her, she had like one, I'm talking about big trash cans, one in the front, one in the back, and she's handling her business. But you have to think about the optics of that, right? And she's doing that. And then, like, one of the next days, first thing in the morning, probably when she first got to work, she found me in my booth, and she said, "I told you I would be back." And she called her, I think her one of her girl children, and she purchased one of the coloring books from me. And she was just so super, supportive. It would not have mattered to me whether she purchased anything or not. But her being a Black worker there, serving when you have all these other people there, people just throwing trash. You get what I'm saying? And then she saw this Black author, and she saw whatever it is that she saw in me and saw in my work. It made her feel a certain type of way. And so we kind of had strangers, right? Two Black women, this kind of like this connection, this bond. And I received that as much as people walking by and turn up their nose, like, "What is this that you have here?" And that is emotionally draining, right? And it's hurtful when you see that time and time again over a certain amount of time. And so that's the experience. But I don't know if other African Americans realize the impact that they can have when you have that communal nature, even among strangers. Because it's like they're like, "I see you, I get it, I've been there. Maybe not in this particular, very really specific space, but I get how difficult it is." And and I think that that is important, that we give that back to each other, no matter where we find ourselves, because you never know in that moment what that person might need. I acknowledge the fact that she was handling her business with that stuff, right? And I see her, she's working, and it was, she was doing what she needed to do, and I could see that, and she was doing a great job. And so I told her because that's what I saw. And so I'm not sure how she received it. She smiled. I think she took it in the way in which it was given, and she gave something back to me as well. So I do think that we have a certain level of responsibility to do what we can to elevate each other, to support each other. And you can do that in the smallest of ways. And you can do it in big ways. It just depends on where you are and what you are capable of doing. And I think we need to be conscious and deliberate about that. Everyone needs that push, that support. Even when you're doing well, sometimes you can always have negative self-talk, right?
Right, right.
So,
I agree. Just just the visual, just seeing you there in that space and spaces like that that we're not supposed to be in,
mhm.
and your books as well. Seeing those Black characters on that book and they're vivid and bold and everything. I mean, that alone, you know, for us looking for someone that looks like us and characters that are us in books and movies and things. I mean, I think that is is important as well. Um, I've gotten a lot of for my book. I have it's a woman on the front cover. You can't you see her from behind, but she has big natural hair, and I've gotten a lot of women responding to I love that cover. And I did that purposely because I wanted people to understand that this was a Black female main character. So I know that just that means something. I mean, the same reason when I mean, I'm an avid reader. I wanted my children to be avid readers. But when they were little, they were.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why, a lot of us as parents, it's easier now, but I'm telling my age, but and I'm proud of that. I'm 51. But when I would go to the bookstores, some stores I had to scour, because my children were reading books with Black children in them, with Black faces in them, with Black main characters, even more important. So the Caribou books was the big one back then in the DC area. Um, because I knew what a difference it made. I knew that. And it still does for adults. It does. It makes a difference. You want to read something you can relate to, characters you can relate to that are written by Black people, because that's another thing that I didn't even know was a thing. Um, Non-Black people writing Black characters, even Black main characters. And I'm like, how does that work? Because
Black people write white characters.
do do they write white main characters?
Yeah, a lot of these, like if you look at
Okay,
Chantelet, I mean,
okay.
a lot
Well,
of
this
like
is I don't understand that, but this is
I feel like we're forced into that space.
okay. That's a choice. But what I'm going to say to that is we are very knowledgeable of their culture.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. We have a
So,
lot more information about them than they have about
right.
us.
So we could probably
Absolutely.
write some credible
And we
characters,
can.
but the inverse is not necessarily true. And the marketing that I haven't actually seen it, but I hear a lot of the conversations online, or it's marketed as a Black romance. And so I've seen a lot of conversations about, okay, what is that definition? What is Black romance? Or what is, I mean, fill in the black, the black. I love it. Fill in the blank. Black romance, Black thriller, Black fantasy. What does that mean? Does it mean that the characters are Black, but the author is any color? Or does that mean the characters are Black and the author is Black? So that I've seen that conversation a lot lately. And people are like, don't be fooled. Do your due diligence and research when you're looking for Black stories. And I have my own, as you can see, strong views about that. But I get it. I get why they want to write us, because hello, we are everything put ER on everything. Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to write characters that look like us, that are us? But it's y'all got plenty of room over there. Let
And
us
I
do
guess,
us.
I mean, white people have already always written, like, think about their history. Most of them write most of our, history. Uh, and I mean, we have tons of historians and they're great, but them writing things that deal with African Americans or Blacks, so people of the African diaspora. That's not new, but this is what occurred to me as I was listening to you speak, is that when you have for readers and certain types of readers, including Black readers, by the way, what I'm going to say is, are they more likely to read a Black romance by a white author versus a Black romance or by a Black author? You kind of see what I'm saying? Because some some readers, and again, I've seen this, is that if a white author written this character, so even though they are Black characters, but this white author that I like, so therefore I'm going to read that. But if it's still that Black love that's written by this Black author, and it's interesting because people, don't get me wrong, people have all those different preferences, but race plays a role in those decisions, even when you are reading a Black love story, with these Black characters, because it's framed through the lens of this white author. And you can say, I feel good about this because I'm reading these Black characters. But honestly, Black people don't say that. Black people, if we dislike something, we just read it. We don't qualify it necessarily. But I'm just throwing it out there because
Right.
there are a lot of things that I think as authors of color that we have to grapple with.
Indy Jones, you
Sometimes
are blowing my mind right now because that never even crossed my mind. And maybe it's because I'm not, sadly, I think it is the reality, but it never crossed my mind. I guess the people that I, am connected to, well, definitely in real life, but I mean online, they are Black readers who want to read Black authors. So I really hadn't considered, I'm having a moment, don't, um,
oh, I get it. I get it. Trust me. I have this
um,
ceiling fan on because at many moments.
um, they,
Exactly.
they, it never occurred to me what you're saying, that there are Black readers who would have to make a choice, or that it would be something to um think through, reading a Black love story by a Black author or white author. You just like blew my mind right there with that one. I can't even lie. That's why if you rewind the tape, my mouth was hanging open because it just really, wow. Okay. All right. I gotta sit with that for a minute. Somebody else say something.
I want to jump in about kind of related to that, Ioka, and it's not about books, but about stories. And we, at the moment, are trying to control our narrative, some of us, but for the most part, they control our narrative. I'm not a comic book person. So when I first heard of, oh, there's a movie, I saw it on Facebook, there's a movie called Black Panther coming out, and all of these people are going to be in it. I'm like, oh, a movie about the Black Panthers. I was like, okay. And so as things unfolded, I'm like, okay, so there's this comic thing. And so it's an interesting thing to me. One, because people were buying out theaters and we were so but at the end of the day, after all of the hype and after I calmed down, I'm like, wait a second. So Disney made money, Marvel made money. My husband told me a white man wrote Black Panther. There were some Black people involved with it, but the whole, even the term Black Panther, if you say Black Panther, probably to someone who's 20, the only Black Panther they know is that movie or that comic character. So it's almost erased. So I kind of feel like them controlling our narrative and their desire to control us, like that's why, yeah, they have plenty of room over there, but they want to be in our spaces. Yeah, you talked about in The Dangers of the Liberal White Educator, all of the why are all of the two Black people sitting together? They want us to be spread out so they can control us and listen to what we're saying and make sure we're saying and thinking what they want us to say and think, in my opinion. So that control, it like, so that's why they're in our spaces, writing Black romance, right? My husband complains about the Black Science Fiction Society. I don't know what it's called, but a Black Science Fiction Society. He like, why are there so many white people in here? I don't understand what's going on. Because they want to control our stories. They want to tell us who we are and tell stories to us that advance their system and perpet. So yeah, I feel like I'm that. I mean, and I feel like a lot of us white people's ice is colder. So if a white person does it, or a major publishing company, it's better. It's than, you know, Kaumba Publishing or Doia Media Publishing. So yeah, I mean, but that's our work. I'm not discouraged at the moment, but you know, that's the work. I feel like that's why we do what we do, because we need to tell our stories to us. You know, we need to have options out there. We need to create options. We got to get our minds back. Okay, I'm finished ranting.
No, no, it's not. I don't look at it as a rant. I mean, and you talk about capitalism and and making money, and if you see that African Americans, Black people are buying X, and they might be buying it from Y people, we're Y, but if I could give them the same thing, right? Just with the visual optics of it, but I package it in this particular way. I put someone out there who they recognize and all that. I mean, it's such a science to how you sell whatever to people. I mean, and there's tons of research to say what do you do if you want to appeal to this particular population, if you want to appeal to that particular population of people. And like I said, and people make a lot of money off of that to make even more money. And
I
so
mean,
I just give
hair
an
care
example.
industry, hello.
You see that I'll give an example from the education. And so I used to be on this multicultural network for the Maryland school system, for the central office for Maryland school system. And so it was representatives from all over the different school systems. And I remember one day they brought this white guy in, and he was talking about anti-racism and everything. And it wasn't that I disagreed with what he said, but I was really annoyed that day. And I was annoyed because what it just clicked with me is that you have these white anti-racists who make tons of money off of racism. And that what you have is that white people, white liberals, are, and I know this from doing coach professional training, they are more likely, more inclined to listen to a white person talk about race than they are a Black person or any other person of color to talk about race, even though they are the ones who actually experience being oppressed because of racism. And so it really pissed me off that you have these white people who are anti-racist who make tons of money. They sell all these books. They do so more than a Black anti-racist who's saying not just the same thing or more because they've actually had the experience. So they're making money off of racism, talking about being an anti-racist, which also means that they are making money off the very same thing that they're saying that they are against. It's a crazy mental gymnastics that you have to do to make it make sense, right? And so I think you have the same thing within the writing area that we're saying. That of course that you need white people to not just write more characters of color, but to write quality characters of color. But then someone will just say, "I'll just write this whole Black romance." And so since you already follow me, I have this social capital behind me. Then you can just read this. You don't necessarily have to get this from these lesser known Black authors. It just makes, like you said, that struggle, especially when you are an independent author and you're really trying to find your niche. You're trying to find those readers who will follow you from one book to the next. It makes it so much more difficult to get your brand out before them so they can see it through all this other stuff that's also thrown at them as well.
It's true.
I have a couple of things. One, I feel like they're not trying to deconstruct the system of racism, just like they're not trying to deconstruct the system of poverty. It's a system, like they're just doing enough to keep it going. So somebody go into Starbucks and have an issue and a bunch of white people make money. A bunch of white people make money, training the cops or training the Starbucks employees to be, but it's not sincere because they're trying to why would they deconstruct the system that their ancestors created to keep them on top? They're not trying to deconstruct it, in my opinion. So that's what makes it make sense. I wanted to loop back to when you were talking about your experience at the comic convention. And I heard you talk about some of your challenge, a challenge as a Black writer, like when people walk by and they're like, what is this? And also some of the highlights or the up things when people walk by and they're like, what is this? What are some of your greatest challenges? What are some of the things that you found most challenging in being a writer? And what are some of the things that have just been most nourishing to you as a writer?
Love the word nourishing. I think just the writing itself, I enjoy every story that I've ever written. And sometimes I get different types of enjoyment out of it. I create stories that I think are good, that are interesting to me. I think that if people are exposed to them, that most of them will probably um agree. A lot of times I'll go into a story and I always say it's not going to be as serious as you make the other one, and it always winds up being that way until I realize that's just you. What are you talking about? That's just you. That's just how you are, right? So why are you trying to pretend and fool yourself? But it's always this is this big thing, and I always feel good about it. You guys mentioned world building. I told my daughter this the other day that I've never written more than 3 books in the same world. So I have a lot of books and they all are different types of world building. And I just created based on the story that I want to tell. And I thought about it, I'm like, so I'm not bad with this world building thing because I just put in there what needs to be in there. And so I love that piece. I love the relationships that I create. Sometimes I'll always read my stories and I listen to it, and I'm always listening for certain things. I'm like, yeah, that really works. I love writing dialogue. I love writing those relationships because whether, like you say, whether someone is a magic user, whether they are a shapeshifter, in the end, it's all about that human element. It's those relationships. That's what carries the story along. That's what draws people in. Yes, if you really like fantasy and you have all these other things that happen, that's the icing, but it's really about the characters, and the characters always have value to me, and I think they have value to people who choose to read my books. For me, that is the easiest part of what I do. Everything else after that, I always find a challenge. The whole marketing piece. I'm an introvert. I'm not this. Not. I'm a humorous person, so I get to know me, but I can't just turn things on and off like that. Just like in my stories, I don't have like this one liner. People call it this great one line. No, my liners is in context with a whole piece, right? So it's hard for me to plot this one great line because things build on each other. That's also the type of person that I am. So I find the whole marketing piece challenging. I find, keeping up with the social media aspect of it as being challenging. I know that I am a very honest and authentic person, but I'm also a person who you have to sit down and have a conversation with. Again, I'm not necessarily going to say this great one line that's going to go viral. That's just typically not who I am, being an introvert. So I always really find that challenging. I am pushing myself every time I do these events, and every time I do so, I become much better at it. I'm able to, I have more confidence in doing. I'm confident in what I wrote, but confidence in saying this is what I wrote. I am an author. That's who I am. So it took me a while to actually, when people say, what did you do? I always default to it as an educator. But it took me a while to say, I'm an author. So it just takes a while to really own that, at least for me, to fully own that, not just in this small space, in these 4 walls where my family reside and who support me unconditionally, but out in the world to fully embrace that. And sometimes you do that by putting yourself out there. And that is something that I do, but it is always a struggle to do that because it's not like you're selling yourself. You're selling, saying this is something that's worthwhile. This is something that's valid because even though it's fantasy, it is still intimately connected to you. You wrote this, you thought these ideas, you executed in this particular way. So it is very personal. And so when you receive certain type of feedback, it is impossible for you not to take it personal. It is impossible. I had, as a highlight at the Convo convention in Chicago, just as an example, it was a father. He came up. He might have been like 50, and he had two young boys. One may have been like early teens, and one may have been like a middle school. The teenager was clear he was not interested in being at my table at all. Okay, now I'm gonna say this. Next to me was a guy, he was a clear extrovert. He sold his butt off. It was this white guy who's also a teacher, by the way. And he had a very punny title to his book. And I'll tell you what it was in a minute. So the older black man came up, he had all the books, and he told the boy to say something. I did not know what the young man said. So he said, so I said, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Could you repeat it? He said, repeat it. And then the young boy said, we support Black. And then his father was like, that's right. And he was like, pick something. I don't care what you pick. You're going to pick something from her and we're going to buy it. And you were talking about the generational difference, right? That boy did not care. He had zero interest in what I had. So I wound up picking Crimson Hunter. And typically when my males, they either buy Crimson Hunter or Dragon Lore and Love. If they ask my husband, he always recommends A Queen's Pride because of the action and violence in it. But those are typically the three books that my male customers will purchase. So the boy was not happy, but that's what his father was trying to instill in him, to support your own. There's a lot of different ways, but coming out your pocket is one way to do it. Yes, you have all this other stuff. So then he bought the book, and then the boy pointed to the guy next to me, and he had a title that it was a punny title on like the word balls. And so it was a punny book and it was meant for adults. So the boy, he pointed like, I really want that. And his father looked at him and he said, you got to be kidding me. No. That is how but there is that generational difference. And so that is part of, I think, as a parent, as grandparents, that we need to really not just have ownership of ourselves, but to instill in that next generation that it is important to have a sense of race consciousness, to have a sense of race pride and responsibility, and that it is many ways in which you can support each other. And I'm not saying just buying any and everything, support unconditionally. That's not what I'm saying. But it should be something in you in which when you see another Black person, you say, let me look and see. Let me give this person a chance, not let me assume that they have nothing of value. There isn't anything that I can learn or get from them, or that we can have a nice exchange as well. And so when I had those moments there, as I had those moments in other places, that's what it is a sense of race pride, is a sense of race consciousness, and saying that we really need to support each other because we know how hard it is out here. And we know that other people will bypass you simply because you're a woman, simply because you write Black characters and you are Black. We know that they will simply bypass you without giving you the credit that is due you, but just even an honest look. And if they look and you say, hey, I really don't want it, that is fine because that's your money. You have a right to choose to spend it however you like. But to totally dismiss something for a shallow reason as gender or race or sexual preference, you
Right.
know, and not to make it totally political, but we see that now in this atmosphere as we switch from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. Now, again, it's a whole lot that we could probably say on that. That's the optics that you see. How she's being, some people being totally dismissive and not looking at what makes her a valid candidate. And you see that at so many different levels. So marketing challenges, trying to address those different types of forms of oppression and natural biases that you know exist, and still saying to yourself, continue to write what you want to write.
Right.
Continue to write it because it has meaning and value to you, and that it does have meaning and value to other people. And that there's certain things that I just choose to honor in myself, even if no one else reads it. Every book I publish, I feel strongly about, and I think it's an important work. And I could not imagine turning out something that I did not feel that way about, simply to say, I want to put this certain type of cover on there to make me more palatable to other people. And again, though, that's a personal choice. I don't mean, I'm not trying to demonize anyone else who've made different
Yeah.
choices for their
Yeah.
lives. But for me, that's how I sleep at night. That's how I want to represent myself here, but also for my children as well. That is important for them to see me making those very deliberate, conscious decisions. And I see that in how they choose to frame their lives as well.
And I want to say two things before we go.
Mhm.
So one, I think, well, not I think, I know that we need to start creating more spaces just for us, meaning spaces where Black authors, Black playwrights, Black fill in the blank, um, can sell their wares, can get uplifted by each other. I know a lot of Black authors that they don't even do the big shows. They only do shows that are for Black. They do some indie shows, if they're indie authors, but they only do Black author specific spaces because that's what they want. They want that energy. Um, but that's not an endorsement or a judgment, just a reality. I get it. And two, I don't want to leave this podcast without giving you your flowers, because okay, what I know what it is. I want you to say, Indy, what a USA Today best-selling author means. How do you get to be that? I need people to understand what you're doing and the level you're doing it.
Well, I will say this, because when people ask, I'll be really honest about that. And what I found is that indie authors, because we struggle with that. There's been situations, and I've been fortunate to be on several anthologies in which we really pooled our resources. So I was able to actually become USA Today bestselling author by working with other authors. And we
Okay.
created, yes, it was not, and I will never claim that I did that all on my own. I did not. It was really strategic. And
But
again,
that
this is
makes it
something
even
that
better.
it makes it. And so indie authors, that they've gotten together and they've done it. And I was really fortunate that the first anthology that I ever participated, I was able to earn that status. And this with other fantasy authors. We pooled our resources. We all wrote a contributing book, and we bust our butts to sell as many copies as we could. And that's how I earned it. And so I think that is probably the easiest way to go, especially when you are a small indie author and you're really just putting everything out yourself. It is not impossible, but it's much more difficult to pull those numbers to the extent to reach that height of either USA Today or New York Times bestselling author, because you don't have that big push behind you with like agents and big publishing houses when everyone is really invested in your success, because it ultimately means their success as well.
Right.
So, like you said earlier, working with other authors, putting yourself in spaces and where you're making those friendships, sister and brother authors, that's the best way to go up. I think about any type of success, working with other people.
Okay. Okay. So it was collective.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
love that.
Umoja, umoja.
Right. I mean, we're
Exactly.
communal people. We need to remember that. Come on now.
Absolutely. Um, I think you answered it before, but I always like to ask, is there anything that you wish we had asked that we didn't ask, or anything you want to say that we didn't ask the right question to elicit?
No, I can't think of anything. I think I talked quite a bit, party, and I'll have to drink some water after this. But I will say before we cut off again, I want to thank you. I am always extremely grateful when I'm asked to engage in any type of discourse or attend type of event. I don't take any of that for granted. And so I always say thank you. I always come to these spaces with a sense of gratitude. And so I want to say thank you both. I enjoyed the conversation. I
You are
enjoyed
so
the
welcome.
discourse. Thank you, ma'am.
But this was
Thank you.
great. I'm so excited that we reached out to you. I knew you were going to
Yes,
be a
ma'am.
really good
Oh,
conversation.
thank you.
Good
Thank you.
find, good
Thank you.
find. Yes, excellent. I feel so energized, and I got a lot of nuggets. I can't wait to see the conversation, because I'm sure there are things I missed, but I got a lot out of this.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate you both.
Yes.
yeah, so thank you for being out here doing it, writing while Black. Thank you for
Yes.
being out here writing while Black.
I
Yes.
love that. I love that, right, my black. That's awesome. I'm gonna do that
Yeah.
hashtag. Is that your, do you guys use that as your hashtag?
Yes, we haven't the IG had I've only done a little bit on it because we haven't officially launched, but
Okay.
it'll become more active. But yes, use the hashtag.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to use it before you all start to use it, but when you do, I definitely would love to use it.